So we're starting here in a directory utility for Windows called Directory Opus. And I like it for a lot of reasons, especially the fact that you can customize it quite a bit. You can see I've chosen some different textures for the different backgrounds here, a specific layout of function buttons and so on, but you can customize it any way you'd like. What I'm going to do is copy the images from the camera. This is what's showing up here, the original raw files from the camera, and just select a few of these to copy over, and I'm copying them into my local hard drive on my computer. I have a drawer called Lightroom Import and then some subfolders, and so anyway, I'm just going to copy those over to the computer, and then from there what I'm going to do is rename them in a batch fashion. Rename function built into Directory Opus. You can do renaming a number of different ways. I usually name my raw files with my initials and the date, underscore, and then a sequence number. So it shows you ahead of time what it's going to convert the name from and to. And I'm going to say OK. So now I've got them the way that I'll eventually back them up. When I actually export them as JPEG files for publication, I'll use a much simpler date, name, a smaller sequence number. But for these raw files that will be used in Lightroom, I'm using this particular format. Next I go into a program called Photo Mechanic, and I use it only really to select what I consider keepers that I will edit in Lightroom. And the program does quite a bit more, but I only use it to really do the culling of those keepers. So what you do is you find the place on the hard drive where you've copied all the files from the camera, and select the first one you want to start looking at. It gives you some information over here on the side, but pretty much you just flag the ones as you go through that you want to keep. And again, most of them I will discard. There's one I want to keep, maybe that one as well. And again, you see how fast it's pulling these through. In Lightroom, you can do somewhat the same thing, but it's a whole lot slower. So that's the main reason I use Photo Mechanic. It's pretty much instantaneous response as you're going through your images, whereas in Lightroom, it takes like a quarter or a half second for each new image to bring up as you're going through these. So again, the camera that I have can record up to 30 frames a second, and so again, most of these frames I will not keep. I'll just flag a few of the ones that I think are worth posting, and then discard the rest. For this event, I captured about 17,000 rapid fire images, and of those I'm coming up with about 600 what I consider keepers that I would publish to the event profile that I have in Flickr. And then I also have a creative kind of works profile where I'll maybe take about 50 of those that I consider the composition especially good, or the type of action going on in the frame exceptional. So again, I'm just going to stop here. Basically, I'll cut out of this portion of the program back to the main index one, tell it to bring up only those that I flagged. And again, this is just an example. Usually I'll have quite a few that I'll flagged, and then I'll tell it to select those and copy those from the current drawer to what I have set up, a little keepers drawer, and just hit that, and it's that quickly copies them over to a place where I can go into Lightroom and pull just the keepers in. So here we are in Lightroom, and I'm looking at the representation of the raw file without any adjustments made. And I've got a number of preset adjustments over here. The one I usually start with is one I saved off, I call it main. If you look at the difference, it's bringing down the highlights and the shadows up just a little bit. But those are the main things that you want to start with. The eye is normally drawn to the brightest parts of an image, especially high contrast, like over here, the white and black, or other bright parts of the image, like the concrete here, and this fellow's t-shirt. So again, I'm going to start with that, and if you come over here to the actual settings, you can see again that I brought down the highlights, boosted the shadows a little bit, and brought up the texture and clarity just marginally. And the vibrance, not the saturation, but the vibrance, brought that up. And you really can't see those clearly until you bring up the actual exposure level. And I usually go up to the graph up here and drag with the mouse up to what I feel like is a good starting level. So again, if you hit a key on the keyboard, it can flip between the original and what you're currently at. So there's the difference so far. Good start. So now what I want to typically do is add some masks to make some further adjustments. And in the case of the concrete here, it's still too bright and a little bit, for my opinion, it's a bit too yellow. So I'm going to take a linear gradient and just drag it out. So now it's affecting everything in this red area here. And so what I'm going to do for that, I'm going to bring down the highlights some more, and I'm going to change the temperature to be less yellow. And then what I'm going to do, since this adjustment is affecting more than just the concrete, but also, as you can see over here, it's the people it's affecting. So I want to tell it to limit that to a certain color range. So I come over here and tell it just limit it to this color range. As you can see, it changed there. If I switch it on and off, that last change, it removed that effect on the people over here. As I go back and forth, you can see. So yeah, if you go up there, you can see the area it's affecting. You can refine that a little bit to be more specific, so it's only getting these brighter areas. So again, I consider that a good move. It go from between the two, it's a little bit dimmer and a little bit less yellow. I just prefer that. Another thing I'd like to do is highlight this fellow here, the main subject, make him come out more, pop more from the background. So what you can do is tell it to create another mask by selecting just the background, and it's going to do its best to figure out what's background and what's the main subject. And in this case, you can see where the red is what it considers the background. Well, it figured some of these people on the side there to be part of the main subject, and I could see that, but just as an example here, I want just the fellow that's to be the main subject. So what I'm going to do is remove that, and instead tell it more specifically which objects. I'm going to say select objects, and it lets me come over here, size up how big my brush is going to be, and I just highlight roughly what the subject is, and then it pulls from that. And as you can see over here, it did a much better job in selecting just that person. And then I tell it to invert so that instead I get everything else but him. And then what I would usually do, I reset these presets, is bring the exposure down, make the shadows up a little bit, bring the overall exposure back up, and again that makes him just a little bit brighter, maybe too much. You have to really use a better judgment on how much to use this effect. Sometimes I'll come down here and use a dehaze, either increase it for the background like that, or make it less and bring the, again, this exposure back down. I think in this case, bringing the dehaze value up is better. And again, you can see the difference if I switch between the two. Again, it's getting closer to what I like. And then next is what I usually do when I get it this close is go to the cropping, and I crop about 99.9% of every image. There's no way I capture with the camera exactly how I want it to look. So definitely level it out, and then decide what you want to be the center of attention. Now, these judges on the side here are oftentimes worth including because of their expressions or what they're looking at. And say in this case I want to keep them, so I decide to keep just the right amount over here, and then bring this over here, keep the subject main. Maybe I want to keep some folks that are looking over there from on the left, and then bring this down a little bit. Depends on where he is on this, but I might bring it all the way up here, and then hit enter, and you can see what you're, get rid of the information here. And that's pretty close to what I'd finish up with. Sometimes I might want to do another linear to bring up a certain area, like over here it's a little bit too dark, so I'll add another linear, this area right here, and bring up just the shadows, or maybe the exposure. And then and maybe I want to highlight this area for him, so I'll maybe add a radial gradient. And oftentimes what I'll do is I'll invert that, and again bring the exposure level down for everything else. So there you go. Those are some basic adjustments I make to the image. And of course the best thing about it is you don't have to redo all of that for each image. Down here is the image I've been working with, but I can just come over to the next image and just bring in all the previous settings from the last frame that you made adjustments for. And things like cropping, you obviously have to reset and make new judgments on. But mostly everything is ready to go. I mean, I go over to where I have all my masks. Now the selection of the object is all messed up, so what I'll do is I want to keep the settings, so I'll just add a new object, select object, and then it'll see what it can come up for that, and I'll get rid of the old object. And there we go, we're back to having just him highlighted there. Invert the mask, and now he's the one that's highlighted above everything else. So again, the main difference between the original raw and the new, quite a bit of difference. So again, I can copy that to the next one and make some minor adjustments, but once I've got the major adjustments decided upon, it's a bit easier to keep going on for the rest of these. One thing I will highlight with this image is my use of Photoshop to extend an area just to give some additional border area to an image. If I go back and look at how I had to crop this, when I straightened it out, it cut this area down. I can't really bring it up there without opening up some area that doesn't have any imagery. So what I'll do for something like this, where I want that extra gap there, is I'll go back to the original import, and then I'll say go edit in Photoshop, and then I'll use its cropping tool to rotate it to where I think I would want it to be. I'm mostly looking down here at those lines there. And then I bring this up to how much I think I would need. I really don't need all this over here. I'm going to go ahead and crop that ahead of time. And then say, okay, that's good. So what I've got is this white wedge up here that doesn't have any imagery. So what I use is the new AI fill or generation to select that area and then tell it to do a generative fill. And it does its best to quickly figure out what kind of trees it should fill it in with there. Again, if I were a reporter documenting an event like this, I probably wouldn't use much of this sort of thing, but I am more of a creative photographer than a reporter, so I don't mind using AI to fill in this wedge. You get 3 options, or you can have it generate another set of 3 to choose between. And just here it's kind of dark to see, but I think I'll go with this one. So I'll go ahead and flatten that image, some of my layers there, and save it back out. And it takes just a couple seconds. Close up Photoshop. It's brought it in for me as a new copy of this original image. So what I'm going to do, go back, a little technical thing here, but go back, go back to my other settings, and then click the new image and say use that previous image's settings, and then I don't have to do the rotation anymore. I can do a reset, and there I go. So this is the area that it generated. Usually if I spent more time, I'd make sure it's not adding. You can see a little bit of a line there, so I would use Lightroom's generative AI to kind of fill that in. Now Lightroom can't do this wedge fill, which is unfortunate. Again, the main reason I use Photoshop now is just to do those type of fills. It can do this sort of thing where it's got existing imagery and you want to, clean it up or remove an object, and it's going to take a little while to figure out and get rid of that. And again, it's still having a little bit of a problem. It seems like it's leaving a little bit there. You can use the older method. I'm going to undo that one and come back here and turn off generative AI and just create a line, and it uses an older method of filling that in, and that in this case looks even a little bit better. So anyway, again, I use Photoshop to do some of the stuff that I just can't do inside Lightroom, at least at the moment. And there you have it. One last application I'll often use to wrap up the editing process gets rid of digital noise, and that's Adobe Labs Denoise AI. Now, that's their older program that they no longer support. Their newer one is Photo AI, and I just like the options that the older product gives you. In Lightroom, you would just select the image and then edit in Topaz Denoise AI, and it makes a copy in Lightroom and then sends that copy over to Denoise AI. Now, as far as denoising, you got a number of different options depending on how bad the noise is. This was a fairly bright day, so it wasn't too bad, and you can set a number of levels, both for removing noise and doing some slight sharpening. And I try not to overdo that, but as far as the denoise, if you look on the left side of this line, you'll see it mostly in the background here. As you swipe over, you can see how it cleans that up. You can see a little bit in the t-shirt here too, not as much. But as far as the sharpening, you can see on the line here how it sharpens it. And again, this might be borderline too much. You can see the hairs of his little beard or goatee there, sharpening it around the teeth, lips, eyes, even text like here. You can see how it improves just a little bit. Again, you can play with the amount that it does its sharpening. But mostly I use this to get rid of the digital noise. Again, this wasn't such a bad case because it was a bright day, but it still needed a little bit of help. So that's all there's to it. You just hit, once you make your choice, usually I have 25 or so images loaded at one time, and it does a batch process. In this case, it was just one image. It brings you back to Lightroom with your copy, and then the original's still there if you wanted to try something different with it. But usually I get rid of that original and just keep the cleaned up image. And that's it.